Hello, everyone. This is Chris Adams with Balancing Act. Thank you so much for joining us. This is the third and final session of our October Quick Start class, and I can see I have an error on the date right in front of us. Today is not October 9th, it's October 16th. I apologize for that. Let's talk about what we're going to do today. And while that screen is coming up, I want to extend a special welcome to the City of Laredo. The City of Laredo is joining us a little bit late, but they are new subscribers to Balancing Act, and we're very glad to have them. And just as a reminder, both to those of you from Laredo as well as any place else, that these recordings are available. All three are available, and you can watch them anytime you'd like. Also, as Balancing Act subscribers, you're also welcome to contact us at any time for technical help or for help learning how to use a feature. Okay, so the plan for today, now that we've gone through the basics about helping you get your simulation set up, get information in, apply some special constraints to your items so that you have a more realistic simulation, is we're going to learn about taxpayer receipt, how to set that up. It's actually very simple once you have a simulation set up. We're going to talk about communicating your work. We've got a couple examples where there have been some really nice simulations that have been created, but they haven't gotten much use. And so I really encourage you to join with your communications department in terms of publicizing your simulation. And then the last thing that we'll talk about today is using Balancing Act in scientifically valid representative research. It's really a much better tool for understanding budget preferences, sincere preferences, willingness to pay than a budget survey, and we'll talk about that a little bit as well. And then we also want to make sure to have time to take any of your questions. So think of your questions. I've been encouraging you all along as you go to come up with questions, and we'll take some time before the end to take them if you have any that you've uncovered in the course of working on your simulation. All right, and also, and the way that you do ask questions is there should be a place next to your name. I think it'll say attendees or participants, and you can simply raise your hand, a little hand icon. Just click on that, and it'll send an indicator to me that you have a question, and I'll call on you. All right. So let's move forward. Let's work first on creating taxpayer receipts. So let's say about half of our clients that use the simulation. Oh, sorry. One more thing I wanted to do before we get to that. Last Wednesday, so since the last time we were together on the Quick Start call, we've done a webinar with the Alliance for Innovation, and I actually think it might be the best example yet of a very comprehensive process where a city has used the Balancing Act tool and done public engagement on the budget. And so I'd really recommend it to all of you. And I'll send out this slide deck to everyone at the end here. But it's really nicely done. It takes about, the Norfolk portion is about 25 minutes long, but they've just done a great job in terms of really thinking through budget engagement at various points in the budget process. And this is the link down here. But as I said, I'll send the slide deck to you once we're done. All right, so now getting to taxpayer receipt. So some of you know about taxpayer receipt already, but just as a quick recap, it actually does an individual estimate of someone's taxes, and it shows where the taxes go. It's a great accountability tool. The genesis for it was the CFO for the city of Denver used to love to go around asking residents how much they thought the average person in Denver paid for snow removal. And they would usually guess numbers along the lines of $200, $250, $175, and she would let them get it completely wrong, and then she would say $12.50. How's that for a deal? And so for some of you who've seen how much snow there is here in Denver, sometimes you would think it's a pretty remarkable deal. And so she asked us to create the taxpayer receipt so that users could see how much they're spending on various city services, and in most cases, it actually looks like a pretty good deal. And the other thing about taxpayer receipt is it's something that has year-round interest. Usually the simulation is sort of episodic. There's a peak of interest when you're identifying priorities, say 3 or 4 months into your fiscal year. There's another peak of interest when the city manager proposes the budget. There seems to be quite a bit of interest there. And then there's sometimes there's some interest when city council is working on it as well. But taxpayer receipt is one of those evergreen tools that seems to have relevance all year round. So let's see if we can take a look. I'm going to click out of this, and I'm actually going to take you to my Sandbox account. Once again, this is called Anytown USA. And so I'm going to go ahead and just build on a simulation that we used previously. So I'm going to say create taxpayer receipt. And I could start from scratch. I could duplicate. So what we need to do here is we need to bring in the spending items, and then the app calculates proportions from that and also estimates taxes paid. And so I could either duplicate a previous one and update it. I could duplicate the spending portion from a simulation if I already have it in, or I could start from scratch. I'll go ahead and start from scratch just to demo again for you how you bring information into the tool. So we're going to call this QS demo, quick start demo. And we'll start from scratch. And once again, I'm just going to that flat file. I'm going to create it. And then I'm going to that flat file. This is revenue, but I'm going to go to spending first. I'm going to go ahead and bring in the spending categories. So it's a flat file that I've got that just has a very limited amount of information. It's got a category, subcategory, and amount, and then the context sections, the context narrative. So let me go ahead and pull this in, Anytown spending for a tax receipt. Wait a minute, sorry about that. Let me see, sometimes I don't actually have a flat file, so let me bring in spending for Anytown. There we go. Okay, so now it's got some cultural dollars in here. It's got police, operations, etc. This doesn't have any dollars in it, so I'm just going to go ahead and put in, go ahead, it doesn't have a subcategory, so I'm going to delete it. Okay. All right, so now let's go over to revenue. This is the key part for taxpayer receipt. So we have a wizard that will help you calculate property tax, income tax, and sales tax, and that works for about 80% of our clients. But if you have a different type of tax or have some special needs, we can do a pretty easy workaround on the back end. Just let us know. There's some cities in Virginia, for example, that counties that have a motor vehicle tax, and they want to put that in here. Kansas has the same thing, where you actually have to have an estimate of how much your car is worth, and you pay a tax based on that. Occasionally, we get a request for a restaurant or a lodging tax, but really, property tax, income tax, and sales tax are the big three, and we've got a really easy way of estimating that. So let's go ahead and do property tax first. So it opens up a wizard that on the right over here, it shows you. Actually, I'm going to take you to an example before we do this. Let's see, I'm going to go to City of Denver, taxpayer receipt, and then it'll give you a little bit more context. So this is how the City of Denver launches their taxpayer receipt. Over here, it's in Spanish. Over here, it's in English. Let's go ahead and do English. And so then it says, want a receipt for your city and county of Denver taxes, answer a few questions to find out how much you paid. What's your annual income? Let's go ahead and put in $50,000. And then it asks your age, and let's go ahead and put in 40. And what this is doing is saying that somebody with this much income has a certain amount of disposable income that it can be used towards goods and services. And then it says a 40-year-old buys a certain market basket of goods and services, some of which are sales taxable and some of which are not. So this calculation is based on an adaptation that we had an economist from Colorado State University do for us, where it uses the consumer expenditure survey to get these estimates that what people at certain ages and incomes, how much they have to spend and what they buy, and then we apply it to an estimate of what's sales taxable in that market basket of goods, and then multiply it times the city sales tax. So it's an estimate. It's pretty good, but it's not perfect, but it seems to serve the purposes of the taxpayer receipt very well. And then down here, we say, what percentage of your shopping for goods and products do you do in Denver? And let's go ahead and just say 80%. And then down here, it's asking about the property tax. So do you own a home? And if you say yes, it says, what's the actual value of your primary residence? And so you click here, and it takes you to the Denver Assessor's website. which I'm not going to do right now. But just to let you know, we can use actual value, market value, assessed value. It really just depends on what multiplier you want to put on the back end. So Denver wanted actual value. Most common is assessed value. I'm going to go ahead and put in the value of their home at $250,000, and then we can see the tax receipt. So you've got affordable housing. For this person is paying $13.95 towards helping with that line item. Capital projects, so there's bond principal and interest on the property tax mill, $189 here, $308 total for capital projects. Scrolling down, you've got things like city council at $2.72, mayor's office 83 cents, and you click on this and you find out what that includes, CEO of the city of Denver, and some of the other things that the mayor's office is responsible for. Down here you've got parks, recreation, and culture. You can take a look at recreation centers and programs, 27 rec centers, 29 pools, 10 rec programs, $11.84. And then you can keep on scrolling down and you see the total tax obligation for this person that we just entered info for. And then if you click on this, you can see a breakdown between how much of that is sales tax and how much is property tax. And then if, down here, you're invited to go try out the simulation if you wish after that. Okay, so that's giving you a sense of what tax fair receipt looks like, and I apologize, I should have done that first. So now we're back on the wizard for creating a new version of it, and we're on the revenue side, and we're looking at property tax. And so over here, it just highlights the area where this information will show up. So if you wanted to use actual value like the city of Denver, you would just replace assessed with actual. And then when you come down here to the multiplier, you would just need to ensure that you're putting in the right multiplier. I'm going to use assessed because that's what's most common. And so that will show up as part of that question there. And then the next thing you need to do for property tax is enter the multiplier value. So if you're using, if you have a mill levy, for example, of 80, you just express that as a decimal. So in this case, 80 mils would be expressed as 0.08. And you can quite a few decimals of accuracy if you want to play that out a little bit. If you're using market or actual value, you simply would modify that so that you've got the correct multiplier up here. And in most cases, that would be the product of the assessment rate and the mill levy. This can be a little tricky. You probably know your own property tax system better than any of us at Balancing Act ever will. But if you have questions about what to enter here, give us a call and we'll help you figure it out. Easiest one though is if you're using assessed value and you're just putting in the mill levy and expressing it as a decimal. This next text field is for what shows up in the info icon. And so typically we put a link to the assessor's office here, wherever they can go to look up real property. We've got one client that's asked if we can find a way to actually just let people enter their address here, and we're working on that. It's a little bit more complicated than one would think it is, but we're trying to see if we can create a simpler way for doing that. But for right now, we've had good success with simply putting a link to the assessor's office. And if we are able to get that feature installed, we'll let folks know about it, and it might be an even easier way for your residents to understand the property tax obligations. Okay, so that's property tax, and then I'm not going to do income tax. It's actually very straightforward, and you really don't need to do too much if you've already set up a sales tax, because that asks for your income. But let's go ahead and do sales tax now. And so sales tax, you can really put whatever revenues you want on taxpayer receipt, but I would really strongly advise you to not feel obligated to have Balancing Act match what people pay at the cash register. So typically there's 2 or 3 taxing entities at the cash register that would add to a cumulative sales tax. But what we encourage you to do is to only take responsibility for showing on taxpayer receipt the portion that's available to you. So For example, in Colorado, in most cities, you're paying about 7% sales tax, but you really, each city is more like 2 or 2.5 or 3. And so we really encourage you to only put the portion in that you're responsible for. And we have an about section where you can sort of provide that additional context with people. So I'm going to put in 2% as a sales tax rate for this city. And then over here, it gives you that option of saying what percentage of your shopping for goods and products do you do within the locality. So this is just an on-off. So if you don't want to ask that question, you just turn it off. If you want to have it asked, you leave it on. There are a couple entities that have not wanted to have that on, but to be honest, I've not really seen any downside to it, so I would encourage you to leave that on. And then down here, if you've got some quirky revenue source or something that's not quite typical, just let us know. We can work out some fancy math and some different text fields if you need to. We had there's a town in Ohio that had a progressive property tax, which was a little bit confusing, but not too hard. We just had to figure out a way to express it mathematically and then put it on the back end. Ohio sometimes has a variable income tax that depends on where you work and where you live. It's kind of complicated, but we found a way around that. So if you've got something that's different than just a straightforward sales tax, income tax, or property tax, just let us know. Okay, so then going back over here, we've just put in our basic revenue calculations. Now we're at spending, and I've already pulled in a few of those options. These are really just sample options. And if I wanted to add another category, I could right here. If I want to edit what the more info says, that's all right here. All very straightforward. So let's go ahead and preview our taxpayer receipt. And so it's saying, want a receipt for your quick start demo taxes, answer a few questions. Annual income, we'll put in 50,000 bucks. And age, let's make this person a little younger, we'll go 35. And then we'll say this person buys her goods about 75% within the city. She owns a home. We'll say the assessed value of that home is about 25,000. And then we'll view the tax receipt. And so this person is paying $911 towards police. And once again, this doesn't really have that many categories, so typically it wouldn't be that high. If there were 18 or 19 categories or subcategories, these items would be a lot different. But the total tax burden is about right, with about $2,000 going towards property tax and about $250 going towards sales tax. And then once again, this would take you to the simulation that's associated with the account. So that's taxpayer receipt. And if anybody has any questions, please let me know. Otherwise, I'm going to keep on going and to our next item. So I think we said that we're going to talk first about taxpayer receipt, then we're going to talk about communicating your work. So that's actually something I'm going to demo that for you instead of talk too much about it. But I will just say that most successful efforts have a strong participation from both the budget finance functions in a city and communications. It's made me sad. There's about 2 or 3 instances where there's been a really fantastic simulation that's been created by the budget finance function, and it doesn't get used very much. And it really is a good idea to get a little bit of help from somebody who is communication savvy. Whether if you're a small town, you may not have a separate communications person, but you know, get at least a couple sets of eyes on this to think about how you might communicate it to your public. We've had great responses. Mayor of Nashville got something like 2,000 people almost immediately by putting it on her Facebook page. We've had little teeny tiny towns in Minnesota that have made some nice videos. I'll actually show you one of those in just a sec, where you've got the mayor just coming on video and sort of asking people to come and provide input. There's sometimes some internal channels. If you have an email list that your city or county sends out, that can be a really effective way of getting it out. I'm going to talk a little bit about videos and earned media. I'm actually going to show you those. So I'm going to go back over here, and I'm just going to take you to our main website. and I'm going to direct you to two tabs. So one is the Customers tab. And so, well, it's not required at all, but we've had some really good success with some of our clients making some very simple videos. So these can range from the elaborate and highly produced to very simple, just look into the camera. This one is from Charlotte, North Carolina. I would say they get the Academy Award for high production values. They did a really nice video. I'm not going to make these run. I'm not sure how well they'll run on the webinar, but you can just take a look on our page, on our homepage, and go to Customers. They just have scenes of people using this around the kitchen table, couples using it, and then they end with a guy with his pants rolled up, sitting inside of a swimming pool and doing balancing act and providing some informed input right from his pool. This one is the city manager just sort of asking people to participate, and they give a little explanation of what residents can expect. This one, I don't think I'm going to push. I don't want the audio to go all over, but this is the one I was telling you about where the mayor is sitting with two actors, and they're pretending to be characters from Prairie Home Companion. They're Lena and Oli, and they're just having a sort of a high-pitched description of the city budget and a conversation about why it's important for everybody to participate. And these guys, in terms of having the highest percentage, it's just a town of about 8,000 people, and they had about 500 or 600 people participate. It was really pretty remarkable. They got nearly 10% of their town to participate. So even if you're a small town, you can still expect some pretty high rates of participation. And then down here, this is just the simplest of all. This is just the mayor of Brighton, Colorado, just going on and saying, we've got some tough things to think about. You know, we've got some streets that need repair, and we've got some public safety issues. And I and my fellow council members care a great deal about what you think the priorities ought to be. So, please go to Balancing Act and help us figure that out. Typically, cities would have a launch page. It doesn't need to be anything too elaborate, but I think it's nice if you sort of describe to people what they'll be looking at. So this is City of Corona, California, and they do theirs in both Spanish and English. And so they talk about tax receipt and balancing act, and they say want a receipt, and just have a little bit of description about it, and click here for the tax receipt, and this is the one in Spanish. And then down here, they've got balancing act and so forth. And it looks like, I didn't realize that they did that, but it looks like they did a very simple little tutorial. I think it's just a screen grab. So it could just be somebody walking people through and then posting it. So once again, those videos are really easy to make, and I think they help. I don't have any evidence on that, but I think that they help with a fair amount. All right. Now let's look at media, earned media. So if you go on our homepage and go to About, nope, I take that back. Oh, sorry, Press. That's what we do. Depending on the media market and what you all have in your own localities, Balancing Act gets incredible press. So this is Channel 13 in Virginia Beach, and you can watch it. It's really pretty remarkable, the positive media that cities and counties have been able to get using Balancing Act. And if you just scroll down, you can see some more examples. Some of these are mentions of the tool, like in Fast Company and government technology, but this one is also about Virginia Beach. This one is about Pittsburgh. This one has the mayor of Pittsburgh and the finance director talking about this tool, and the mayor's asking people once again to provide some input. They've had some good responses with that. This one is KQED. It's the big public radio station in the Bay Area, and they've got the San Jose mayor sort of demoing Balancing Act for residents. This one is Norfolk once again. This is the Chesterfield County, Virginia, I believe. This is NACO talking about Milwaukee County. You should have some decent experience with some opportunities to get some good information on this, and so it's just really good opportunities for people to get some good press. This is Charlottesville, Virginia, Moreno Valley, Southside Daily. I think that might be Portsmouth, Denver Post. So there's all sorts of examples of really good earned media. And so once again, this is where a communications professional can really help you. Okay, I think I've covered all of that. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is research. So we always get the question, even if you get hundreds and hundreds of participants using Balancing Act, people say, well, is it representative? And how do I know that we're not just getting a certain type of person, that maybe there might be some interest groups that are pushing people out? And that's a very good question. It's a totally legitimate question. And so, one answer is that it's an open and free website, and so we can't really control who goes there. But I can tell you that we haven't had any known or identifiable examples of a group or individuals trying to game the system. That generally people, we generally get participation of between 8 and 12 minutes, and so there just aren't that many examples that we can point to where we've seen suspicious activity. But having said that, we do understand that some local governments really want to have a representative view, and that they can have some confidence in about people, how people weigh these various budget choices, the trade-offs, and there's something that economists call willingness to pay. So balancing what you're willing to pay in taxes with what you think you're getting back in terms of services. Another way of putting it is sincere preferences, trying to not just have people say, yes, I love having my trash picked up, and I love having roads to drive on, and I love having a fire department that's available should I need it. But instead of getting those more sincere preferences, say, these are the things I really want, especially if I can't have everything. This is a quote. Budget surveys, I think, are becoming, they've never been very good because they don't provide, they usually don't provide the relative costs of things, and most of the time what surveys show is that people love almost every service and they dislike almost every tax. And so I love this quote from these two professors at University of Connecticut. They say, without being faced with the real budget constraints and service needs facing decision makers or the cost of their choices, citizens appear to find acceptable any government services that don't offend them. Little is learned from such efforts. And if you all have done budget surveys, whether or not they're scientifically valid representative surveys or just put something out and let people respond, you probably have found that same thing. And so the nice thing about simulations is that they provide context, they show trade-offs, they show a relationship between the revenue side and the spending side, and they're really, I think, quite a bit better. So this is from a study that was done by 3 university-based researchers, and I can give you a copy of the study if you want. But they're basically saying that simulations are a much better way of getting information from residents than surveys are. I mean, the first is that it provides real-world information. It's not just sometimes entities do things like how would you spend $100, and what these researchers found is that that's so contrived, and people know it's not very realistic, that sometimes they just put $100 on what they like the most, which is parks or something like that. But by providing them with a simulation that has descriptions of what services are, of what some of the trade-offs are, and shows the relationship between taxing and spending, they actually get much better information. The other thing about simulations is that they can immediately show the impact, that you can see the connection between a choice and what it means for overall budget balance, or what it means in terms of what you can or can't do on spending based on choices about spending more on one item or less on one item, or increasing or decreasing taxes. And the other thing is that you can provide a great deal of information. Surveys don't really teach much, whereas simulations provide a great opportunity for knowledge gain and understanding, which is both useful in the short term, but also as your residents, year over year, the more that they can understand what government is doing for them, the more likely they are to appreciate the value of that. One additional point, and this is a point I've been making during all 3 of these quick start sessions, is that simulations provide an opportunity for you to share constraints. You're really trying to put them in your shoes and really encouraging them to be problem solvers with you. Now, I think I'm going to show you, just in case you're interested, the version of Balancing Act. It's our research version, and this is for the U.S. government, but just to kind of give you a sense of what it looks like. And that's not it. It must be this one right here. So as you can see, it looks a little bit different. So we worked with those 3 social scientists to come up with a version that would be scientifically valid. And so I'm going to refresh this and just kind of show you some of the highlights. So this is for the U.S. federal budget, and they were trying to research resident preferences on the deficit. And so the budget starts out $513 billion in deficit. And then over here, because people can sometimes get sort of lost in the simulation because there's so much to learn, they put a timer on here. And so this timer doesn't do anything when it ends, but they really didn't want people to spend more than about 10 minutes. And so they just wanted people to, this is just meant to be a little bit of a gentle nudge. Now, then on spending, you've got obviously the categories that are relevant at the federal budget over here, and you've got taxes that are relevant on the federal level over here. So it's mostly income tax, but there's other things too, payroll tax, et cetera. But the thing that's interesting, let me refresh this. And so just remember that this was, the top one was defense, and this one is income tax on low incomes. So I'm going to refresh this. And we should come up with a different arrangement. Yes, so now we've got all other spending here instead of defense. So in order to make it valid, we came up with a way of randomizing the categories. We also took out a lot of the blue info icons. Well, I think maybe we left them there, but we simplified them quite a bit because they didn't want it to bias people. And then we connected it with a survey company that both recruits a representative sample. It's actually, believe it or not, it's easier in a larger city because it's less expensive to get a representative sample. Typically, it's about $5 to $7 a person to go through this, and typically, if you can get 400 to 600 people, you can declare it to be a representative sample. But the way that it works is that you start the research project at a survey page. It could be SurveyMonkey, it could be YouGov or SSSI. There's a number of companies that do this. And then after answering a few questions on the survey, people are sent to the simulation, and they get the 10 minutes to go through it. And then they submit this, and right now it's not hooked up, but it just says submit budget and go back to survey. Then it asks them a few other questions about what they're interested in. So it's actually a really nice way of getting really the best of both worlds, because you can ask some of those general budget questions about overall priorities, et cetera. But then you get to get that really fine-grained information about what they really would prefer, and you can put in service levels and things like that. And so this is something that we're quite excited about, and we're looking forward to doing with more and more localities. And it's not terribly expensive. If you're already thinking about doing a scientific survey, this is really not going to cost much more than that. So let me go back to my PowerPoint, and I think that's all I had. So we are always available to chat. You can get a human usually right away, if not within a couple hours. And we are available to answer questions and provide technical support. We can do demos for you and your team. Once again, don't forget that if you'd like to have a trial, if you haven't already, just go to our website and scroll down to the bottom where it says sign up, and you'll get a free trial. And if you let me know, I can enable some additional features for you so you can try everything out. You can always go back and look at previous versions of QuickStart. I'll send some links to you after we get off the call today. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I don't think there is. So if you have any questions, please go ahead and raise your hand and ask, or you can use chat or any variety of electronic means of communicating. And I'm not seeing anything. And I know I've been in touch with several of you offline, so I'm just going to assume that everybody's good to go now. But it's been fun chatting with you all, and I appreciate your interest in Balancing Act, and we're always looking forward to suggestions and new challenges to help you overcome. So that's it for now, and we'll talk soon, I hope. Thanks very much, folks. Goodbye.